to this webinar sponsored by the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence at St. Leo University. We'll be recording this webinar, so if you'd like to view it later or recommend it to a colleague, you'll find it on our webinar page of our CTLE website, which hopefully will be operating this afternoon. Or you can find it on our YouTube channel. We'll drop the links in for those in the chat at the end of the session today. 10 minutes before we end, we'll also be dropping a link into the chat for a feedback form. And we really appreciate your feedback on all of the things that we do. And they're very short. It's just like a 3-minute feedback form. So if you would, grab that link when it gets dropped in so that when the webinar ends, you'll still have the link and can just fill out that real quick feedback form. I'm Dr. Candace Roberts, the Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning Excellence, and our topic for today is AI strategies for the writing intensive classroom. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Karina Zelaya. Karina is a graduate of our master's program in creative writing. She's a native of South Florida. She earned a BA in telecommunications and film from the University of West Florida, and she worked in network operations and master control for television broadcasting before finding her true love in storytelling. She left her position in television, enrolled at St. Leo's creative writing program, and started copywriting professionally. Today, she works for a digital marketing agency called Digital Resource, where she is the manager of their SEO, or search engine optimizing content marketing team, consisting of 22 SEO and content writers. Outside of television and digital marketing, she's worked in novel promotions, journalism, and graphic design. Karina did a webinar for us just a few weeks ago about how AI is being used in the workplace, and it was fabulous. We had great response from that. And I know that today's is going to be incredibly informative, and we're just so grateful to have her back. Karina, take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. Every time I hear that introduction, it makes me so happy. Makes me feel so good. Thank you again for allowing me to be here. Like she said, my name is Karina. I'm from here. I went to St. Leo, and when I graduated, I just loved that place. So I was really excited to be able to come back and do something with you guys. So like she said, I am currently working in marketing. If anybody has looked into the marketing field, AI, when it came onto the scene, it was a complete game changer. Everybody in the space was saying how you can ditch your writing team and just write your website with AI. You can, do all this stuff. And so as a manager of a writing team for a marketing company, I had to think really quickly into how to make sure that we enacted this system while keeping my writer safe. And so we started enabling all these strategies. We started testing this thing to death. We have found corner to corner. We use it every single day. We have found strategies to actually make our service more valuable, even though we are using ChatGPT. And so I'm hoping that I can be of some value to you guys. If you have any questions, just like on the industry or how AI works that I don't cover, please let me know. I'll have my contact information at the end. So I would love to answer any questions that you guys have, okay? So first, we're going to get into it. I'm going to share my screen and we'll start the presentation. All right, so we're going to talk about AI in the writing intensive classroom. This is a part 2. And we're first going to go over a few things that we talked about last time, just so that it's fresh in your mind. And if anybody wasn't here, they're kind of up to speed. So some really popular AI platforms that you may have heard of: Jasper, Copy.ai, WriteSonic, which has a really cool custom chatbot that you can train yourself versus going off of what other people have trained. ChatGPT, which is the most widely used. We've all heard of it. That's what we're going to focus on most today. Bard, which is Google's version of their chatbot. It has much more internet access, but the writing is not nearly as fluid. And then Claude, which came onto the market probably a couple of months ago. The thing with Claude is that it's only available in the US. So if you have international students, they can't use it. So a lot of people are just not worrying about it right now, because if it's not available outside of the US, it's probably not very advanced anyway. So, and that only has a cutoff until 2022. All of these systems are large language models. Basically means that they learn how to respond to you based off of massive data dumps based from their creators. So what their creators do is they take all this information, they download it into a program and say, okay, find the patterns here. And then based off of these patterns, create a response. Okay. ChatGPT and Bard, like I said, they are the most common, but they are large language models, which means that they do not have infinite knowledge. They do not have consistent access to the internet. Bard definitely has more access to the internet because it's made by Google. Google obviously is like the main search engine that everybody uses. But it only has access through searches. So if nobody has actually searched for something and clicked through to a website, it won't know that it exists. Or it has to wait for its weekly data dump of what's new on the internet. And then ChatGPT has a cutoff at about 2021. So unless somebody pays for ChatGPT and knows how to use a bunch of plugins, they're not getting internet access. And ChatGPT might just say, nope, we can't help you because we don't know the answer to that. Okay. Everybody with me so far? Cool. All right, next, I went backwards. There we go. Next, I also want to touch on legalities. There have been about 14 lawsuits opened in 2022 against OpenAI. There's only 4 open right now, but there has been a huge issue, mainly around 2 that are open right now. So California law firm filed a class action lawsuit against OpenAI, alleging that the company violated the copyrights of millions of internet users by using data scraped from the internet. And then the other one is the regulatory compliance class action lawsuit was filed in California, alleging that OpenAI violated the California Consumer Privacy Act by collecting personal information. A majority of the lawsuits that have been opened against AI have been solely based on authors who have written things, they've published it on the internet, or their digital books are available, and they're accusing OpenAI of using their copyrighted work to train this chatbot and give responses. Unfortunately, because you post something on the internet, it's very hard to create that lawsuit. So OpenAI has won most of them, but it is definitely something to be careful of. And then there are some more serious ones. So bias and discrimination. In June, a radio host in Georgia filed a defamation lawsuit against OpenAI, alleging that ChatGPT was used to generate text that falsely accused him of embezzlement. So somebody that he worked with looked him up on ChatGPT or asked about him and found that he had embezzled, or ChatGPT told this coworker that he had embezzled from a firearms society. He was not associated with, or he claims he was not associated with it in any way. And now he's obviously, he's not guilty until proven guilty. He's innocent until proven guilty. But now he has all of this trouble based around ChatGPT giving false information, which is, it's ridiculous, quite honestly. But ChatGPT is not infallible. Liability, a New York lawyer was sanctioned by federal court for citing fake legal cases. So somebody did not want to do their homework and they went on ChatGPT and said, hey, what can I use in this court case tomorrow? And give me a bunch of evidence. Give me a bunch of lawsuits that I can look up and practice. He brought those to court and they were all fake because ChatGPT probably looked at patterns between different lawsuits, put them all together and gave him something that it thought made sense because it's based on patterns. And it wasn't. So now he's in a lot of trouble. So all this to say that ChatGPT is a great tool, but when it comes down to the ethics of it, it should be used as a tool. So everything we talk about today and everything we do going forward with this tool should not be trusted. It should be used to enhance your own personal mental ability, your own personal strengths. It is used to enhance, not to create and publish. Okay. All right, and then let's just go into some output limitations real quick. So when you generate something on ChatGPT, there are a few things that you're going to see right away. One is repetitiveness. Intros and conclusions are almost always one of only a few different outputs. Okay. I had to tell my writers to stop writing calls to actions and conclusions in ChatGPT because 1, fine, sounds good. 5, sounds good. When we're publishing 500 blogs a month, if a majority of them sound exactly the same, not only is it kind of plagiarism in a sense, even though it's writing ourselves, it's also bad for search engines. They look at that copy, they think it's unvaluable because they think that you just copy and paste it to a bunch of sites. It's not bringing any value to the user, and they'll dock you farther down the search engines. So we don't even use it for conclusions anymore. So a lot of repetitiveness. Inaccuracies. cut off at 2021 again. And the plugins, be wary. They're created by just random developers who created this plugin because they saw it in the industry, and OpenAI was like, yeah, this is something that we need. We'll put your plugin on our platform. So they're not infallible. They don't always give good information, even though they are connected to the internet. Very little evidence. Odds are if you get a paper and there are like 5 or 6 sentences in a row that are very top level and they give absolutely no convicting evidence as to what the paper's about, they probably used this platform. Generic outputs due to limitations added to the program after people misused it. So if you were to ask ChatGPT a question now that you asked it when it was first created, it's going to give you a completely different and much more generic answer now than it did then. The reason for that is because people misused it, as humans misuse most of our technology. They started asking, how do I create a bomb? How do I flee this country? How do I do all this crazy stuff? And ChatGPT or OpenAI got in a lot of trouble. So they have to, by design, create more generic responses so they don't fall into that issue. So, I admit somebody. And so now all their answers are going to be generic on purpose. And I can't imagine it gets any better from here, quite honestly. When asking for specific poetry formulas, the program will clutter it with slant rhymes. I have yet to see a perfect poem come out of ChatGPT. And slant rhymes aren't bad, but when it's like every line is not like a perfect poem or a perfect rhyme, it becomes a little bit, like something isn't right here. So that's something that ChatGPT does a lot. The longer the writing, the more grammatical comprehension errors. Okay, so if you ask it to write a paragraph, grammar might be perfect. Ask it to write a blog, grammar might be okay. Ask it to write a 1,000-word essay, it's going to be an absolute mess. It's going to read fine, but it's not going to have consistent comma usage. It's probably going to have semicolons where it shouldn't. It might have randomly capitalized words because it wants to put emphasis on something, but like it's nothing to have emphasis on. It's going to have a lot of inconsistencies. And then honestly, I've never seen ChatGPT put a thesis statement in here. I put often, so I'm not using absolutes, but I have never seen it put a good thesis statement into a paper. Typically, it just goes straight into whatever it's talking about, and then we have to go through. And there have been so many times where I get a paper and I send it right back to my writer, and I'm like, guys, you didn't tell me what you're about to talk about. Look at this again and then send it back to me. Doesn't do thesis statements really well. So definitely something to be careful of. Okay, now this is where we're going to change up some of the information, okay? Before we talked about expectations by company owners, right? They're going to save a bunch of money. They're going to save a bunch of time. Now let's talk about expectations by writing students, right? I had a lot of these things said to me as I was hiring and as I started teaching my writers. AI will write all of my essays for me. Maybe it'll give you a starting point, but it's not going to write everything, right? It's not going to do number 3 and save you loads of time. It's going to generate a base, but if you really want a truly convicting essay, you're going to have to put some of your own human into it. So I think it's going to write all my essays for me. It's going to save me loads of time. It's going to understand all of my instructions. Again, no. A lot of times, I mean, it will understand a lot of instructions. I don't want to say that it's stupid because obviously it's not, right? We've all seen that it can do some pretty amazing things, but it doesn't understand complex instructions. And I'll show you later on a flow chart as to how to prompt ChatGPT that I actually use to teach my writers. But it's a very broken down, small step-by-step system. It's not going to understand everything in the first try. And a lot of the times if you tell it, oh, no, I asked you to do this and you didn't do it, it will actually respond to you and say, oh, sorry, you're right. That was my mistake. Let me try it again. It knows that it's still in this beta testing state. It probably should have kept the word beta on it for longer, just like Google did with its experiment, because it knows that it's infallible. And when you sign up for an account, it gives you a pop-up that says, just know everything might not be factual, but you're welcome to give it a try. And it does that because it knows that it has issues. Be completely undetectable. AI writer will be completely undetectable. I will say that if you guys have heard about these systems online that will catch AI writing, don't fall for it. I thought it was the coolest thing at first. And then I started running some of my blogs through it from before ChatGPT was even a thought. And it was saying that they were 100% by AI. So all of those AI detectors that you're going to find on the internet, I wouldn't even bother using it. I would just go off of the patterns that you're finding. Some of the patterns I just talked about here. I also had a list of patterns in my last talk. And then you can find a bunch of stuff online. There are a lot of very small patterns when you use this program enough that you can find. But those generators, they're going to try and find robotic terms and robotic lines, but that's not what ChatGPT does. It's very unrobotic. And so, like I said, my essays from 2012 that I tried to put through there were 100% by AI. So I wouldn't fall for those. Generate creative content that I don't need to fact check. We've already went through that. There's lawsuits open because people didn't want to fact check their stuff. So obviously that's not realistic. But a lot of writing students are coming in here thinking this. They're going to think that they can come in here, write whatever instructions, they're going to get a perfect prompt and they can turn it in. And that's sort of scary, right? And so we really have to teach them how to use it responsibly and not to lean on it. Just like how we learned longhand before using a calculator, right? You got to learn how to do something responsibly before you take the shortcut and possibly do it wrong and get yourself into a lot of trouble. Okay. Now let's talk about the importance of bringing it into the classroom, right? We just talked a little bit about why we need to teach them how to use it responsibly, right? They can get them into some trouble, right? Some legal issues if they bring it to the wrong place. But more than that, it's preparation, right? Students are going to have to use these tools in some capacity after they graduate, no matter what field they're in. We've always had AI, but they weren't labeled AI. We've always had generators. We've a Canva, what I'm using right now, to an extent, it does a lot of the design for me. And AI is just a computerized system who can understand patterns and do things for you. So a lot of these AI systems are labeled AI now, but they've been around for a long time. But because they're labeled AI, companies are really excited. So whether you're in the science field, whether you're in the writing field, whether you are a teacher, whether you're in the service industry, you're going to have to use this in some capacities. Ever been to a restaurant and you don't have to pay a waiter anymore? You just pay the electronic box on the table. That is a form of AI. So they're going to have to learn how to understand the boundaries of this really powerful system after they graduate. And the worst thing we could possibly do, which I'll talk about later as well, is ban it or tell them that they should absolutely not be using the system, because then they're going to get out there and be so confused and try to dive in knowing absolutely nothing and probably get themselves into a lot of trouble. So we definitely need to prepare them for what's going on. And then personalized learning. This is one thing that I learned definitely after some trial and error, that all of my writers were in different places. And I didn't realize, because I trained them all the same way. I trained them all to do the same type of tasks, how to write using the same sort of outlining tools and stuff. And then when they started using ChatGPT, it actually really opened up a lot of technological gaps in where they all were at, how comfortable they were, how maybe self-conscious they were about where they were at. And I had to do a lot of things differently. So ChatGPT actually really helped me in a lot of ways come up with learning systems, training systems, and timelines that were specific to Susie that Kevin probably didn't need, right? I could put in some templates in here, and I could say, hey, ChatGPT, here's this template. Can you give me a 10-step system on how to fill in this template? Kevin's not going to need that. But maybe Susie did, right? She needed the step-by-step of like, okay, start here. Okay, look for this, right? And it didn't make it any less valuable. It was just a little bit of a guide in the right direction. And ChatGPT saved so much time allowing me to do that. So it really does help personalize people at different speaking levels. And also public speaking. One thing that I always really encourage my team to do is create classrooms like this. We do something in-house called a DR classroom. And every team, every department has to teach one class every month. And I typically delegate it out to my seniors because I want them to have more experience with the public speaking. And what they've started doing with ChatGPT is they will put their speech, right, their script into ChatGPT and ask it, hey, I'm trying to practice this presentation. Ask me questions based off of this presentation. And ChatGPT will actually ask it questions based off of the topic. So now my writers can say, oh, that's a good question. Okay, let me fit this into my speech. So it really helps personalize whatever you're trying to do. Still on the same page? I feel like I've been talking nonstop, not taking a breath. Okay, cool. All right, cool. So now let's go into what teachers are doing, right? What we are doing, how it can help us save time. And a lot of this stuff, like rubrics, I'm not going to deal a lot with rubrics, but a lot of this stuff also crosses over into what I'm doing in the marketing industry, right? So first is email templates. You guys do a welcome email at the beginning of the year, announcement emails, holiday emails, telling the class that something else is going on. You don't need to write all these things out, right? You can just create templates in ChatGPT, and it does do them really well, especially in a conversational tone. And then you're done for the year. You just fill in the blank and send it out. It saves so much time. And then blending that in with communicating with difficult personalities. We have all dealt with someone who you give them something in writing and they will find something to not understand or not like, or they're going to try and nitpick something, right? When I have a difficult client and I have to give them answers to a question, and I just know, instead of sitting there at my computer and looking at my email for 20 minutes trying to figure out, okay, what could they possibly misconstrue based off of what I am saying, I will put it into ChatGPT and I will say, hey, I am giving this to somebody who loves to tear apart everything that I say. I need this to be completely clear, concise, with no questions asked. And it will give me suggestions. It will rewrite it. I rarely use the actual output. I will always edit it. But typically it does sort of rearrange based on the patterns of difficult personalities around the internet. It will give me a pretty clean communication template for dealing with those difficult personalities. So that was a huge benefit for me and a huge time saver for me. Way less stress with dealing with clients that just are asking me the impossible questions. Prompts. So this is one thing that I've started with my team, obviously as a writer, even though I'm in the marketing industry, I will never stop being a storyteller. So one thing that my team does every other week in our team meetings is we start off with flash fiction to keep us creative. And instead of having to think about all of these prompts, I have my prompts for the next year already put together. And I had ChatGPT, hey, just give me 24 prompts based off of this. And it gave me a bunch of them. And am I going to use all of them? No. But if I'm having a really crazy week and this meeting just sneaks up on me, I have a list to pull from. And they're pretty good, and my writers are good. So even if it's a boring prompt, they will be creative. They have to be creative with it. So writing prompts in the classroom. What a lot of teachers are also doing right now is to reestablish writing in the classroom by hand, longhand. They are actually having a technology-free environment at the beginning of the classroom, and they are setting a timer, and they're saying, this is the prompt. The only rule is that you cannot stop writing until the end of the timer. And these students have to sit with a notebook and a pen and pencil and write just until that timer ends. And then throughout the semester, they will expand it until at the end of 15, 20 minutes, or at the end of the semester, 15, 20 minutes goes by and the students have absolutely no issue writing for that long, no nonstop using their brain, in person. And it's this strategy of don't rely on computer to use spell check and to do all this stuff and get distracted trying to make things perfect, or in this case, use ChatGPT. It's very much you have a brain, use it, figure out how to use it. You're going to learn how to flow. It's going to become very easy for you. You're just going to be uncomfortable at first, but you're uncomfortable enough, it's going to become comfortable. So prompts, assignment instructions. I did this a lot while training my writers how to use this because, and this is where I'll kind of go over to what how I taught my team. I had a workflow that I created. But when I know how to do this, And when it comes to like training on like publishing to different CMSs, different websites, or writing different types of papers, it's one of those tedious things that I know I have to do because I am the expert, but it's so tedious that it's going to take me way longer than I would like to take doing it. So a lot of times I will just have ChatGPT write out, generate instructions, and then I will just edit it later and pass it out. Makes things a whole lot easier. Same thing with study guides. If you guys have a digital textbook, throw the chapter into ChatGPT, say, hey, can you create a 24-point study guide? And it will summarize it in points for your team, or to put questions, right? Study questions together. It will just summarize whatever you put into it, this digital textbook, and it will give you study questions. And you didn't have to sit there for an hour creating this study guide. It did it for you. And you put in the information. Obviously, like I said, you're going to read it. You're going to make sure that it makes sense, right? Because who knows if ChatGPT did see the textbook and add a little something into it, right? But if you read it and it makes sense, you just saved yourself a whole lot of time. So instructions and study guides. Rubrics. This is actually something I found online while preparing for this talk. I didn't even think about creating a rubric or like a grading guide. And so I tried it with a bunch of different types of assignments that we write, and like even write presentation skills and stuff. And it did a really good job creating rubrics. So like in a presentation, it might say like, it's going to point out posture, it's going to point out memorization, facial expressions, and I asked it to create a rubric for somebody memorizing and performing a piece of poetry. And it gave me so many things that you wouldn't, it was like a rubric for slam poetry. And it might not be as intense as things that you guys are doing in the classroom, but it was a really good starting place. And I would trust it and use it in my team. I am going to start trying to do that with my team, even as just like a guide, like, hey guys, you guys should be hitting all of these points. It made life so much easier. Creating customized lesson timelines based on individual student levels. We already talked about that. But yeah, I mean, this is obviously we can all do this by hand. You guys probably do this every single year, all over again. But if this can save you so much time doing that, why not use this tool, right? All right, now we can talk about the classroom, okay? So teaching students to use it responsibly. I'm going to talk about two different ways of teaching students to use ChatGPT. I'm only talking about these two because there were a lot on the internet, but they all intersected with these two main ways. You're going to find a lot of different teachers doing like little things different, but ultimately these were the core. And it's really going to depend on what your classroom looks like and the kind of students you have and how many students you have and what kind of English you're teaching. What is what's the purpose, right? But these are kind of like the main grounds, right? So one, have the students create a prompt in the classroom all together. You give them like a list of, you need a subject, you need an action, right? You need a length, you need a voice, right? Give them a list of things and they're going to create a prompt in the classroom. I have a team of 20 writers, so it's easy for us to just go around the room. We sit in a big circle and we went around the room and everybody just said, oh, I think this is going to be my prompt. And other people were like, oh, that's good to have in there, right? And then they all went away and they generated it, right? They bring it back, the generated output, they bring it back and some people read it out loud, right? And then we asked ChatGPT to fix the essay. And then they bring both the output and the feedback back, and we all look at it together. And we determine if the feedback is valuable for the original essay. And then we can correct the essay together. We can figure out like, did that feedback make sense? Is that the kind of feedback that we are looking for, right? Maybe we can ask it to give us different types of feedback. And then, okay, so now let's add that in here and let's see if ChatGPT can add it in here and let's see what it looks like when we do it, right? And so this feedback system for ChatGPT is like such a big thing that people are doing right now, because if you can trust it to give feedback based on these essays, then you could possibly allow the student to have some sort of mentor when they're outside of the classroom. if you can trust ChatGPT to get there. But if you can trust ChatGPT to get there, it means that you probably figured out a foolproof prompt that lets it understand the kind of feedback you want to relay. So yeah, creating a prompt, showing them how these prompts can really make a difference. And now I am actually going to get out of this presentation and go somewhere else so that you guys can see something else. Okay, everybody can still see my screen, right? You see my internet browser? Okay. So I am going to, I gotta move this bar here. I'm gonna come here. Okay, so this is something that I created for my team, okay? I realized that when we started ChatGPT, my team was so lost. They were just trying to take the simplest way out of doing this because everybody was saying, oh, you can just ask it to write a 500-word blog and it goes. And I found the best way to teach them how that you need to train ChatGPT to sound the way you want to is to create an actual workflow. So if you look at this, I have, and if you guys want this, I can send this to you after too as like a guide. But basically I have 3 different things here. I have, and this is created a program. This is created with a program called Milanote. I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but it's basically like a digital pegboard. It's really cool. Anyway, so no defined header structure, right? So if we're just writing an essay, we don't know what our headers are. We don't necessarily know what we want it to look like, if it's a how-to or if it's a research thing or whatever. We just need to generate content, right? This is where we start. We ask it to give 5 titles for the blog about topic for this website with this keyword, okay? We have the pro in-house, so that's why we put the URL in there and we have a plugin will pick it up. All right, and then after that, we have to create an outline for this title that it gave us. And then write this blog in at least this many words for this company, and then link it again to the website. And then read and review the blog with for the client voice and ensure that the content shows minimal repetitiveness. And then if the blog voice is off focus, rewrite this blog in this voice, right? All these italicized are the actual prompts. You must ask ChatGPT to rewrite the comment directly below the writing bulk. ChatGPT has a really hard time referencing things that were said in other comments, so you have to do it like right below it. ChatGPT will not write more than 600-ish words at a time. If it stops mid-thought, just say keep going. ChatGPT should continue its sentence. Sometimes if you write things that are too long, it will stop mid-sentence. So you have to ask it to keep going to complete that sentence, which is wild, but it does it. Copy and paste your blog into a document and start editing, right? And I'm not going to go through all of this, right? Because a lot of this is applicable to marketing, right? But this broken down system gave them somewhere to start to understand that this was not an easy plug and play action. This was something that they got much better results by training it and working it up little by little, right? And even going through all of these, yeah, it saved time. We cut our time in half within our department, but we learned that it wasn't something that the CEOs and everybody else in the world was saying to say, write a 500-word blog. It was something that really took mental capacity. It was something that took thought. It was something that you needed to watch it every step of the way. If not, you were not going to get what you wanted. And it also kind of taught them to be able to see the holes in ChatGPT along the way. Because that was one of the things I found too, is that when I was telling them, all right, this is your blog, write about dental implants in 500 words or more. It was going to be like, they were just going to put this big, huge, bulky thing in there. And it just wasn't good. So I really needed to force them to go step by step and see the progression. And this allowed them to do that. Okay. I think giving them this structure, even though a lot of them probably don't follow this anymore because they found their own way of doing things, giving them a baseline structure like this, a workflow of just all of these different steps, allowed them to create their own space within ChatGPT and find how it works best for them. Okay. And these are also in here, right? H2s, H3s, ChatGPT understands that. longer and more detailed. I have a little like tip section over here. We actually ended up continuing in like a different Melanote. We have some tips and stuff. But this was the base. And I really, this made such a huge difference. Okay. Now let's go back over here. Okay. So that's one, right? Create a prompt together, have them generate it, ask ChatGPT how to fix it, bring the output and the feedback, figure out if the feedback is valuable and in class, and then how to fix the essay, right? Correct it together. The next big one here is have students write an essay in the classroom, and they will later enter it into ChatGPT and ask the program to correct it. In class, the student will compare their essay to the output of ChatGPT, and they will find the inconsistencies between the two, and then they will write in class a third draft based off of their findings. This is definitely more on the side of you want them to you want to teach them how to write it in class, right? You want to teach them the longhand first before going to the ChatGPT stuff, but it also does teach them how to find these holes. One thing that I've also adopted with my team is that with those flash fictions, we've evolved a little bit. And now I will pick 2 or 3 people on the team to either write their flash fiction completely in ChatGPT, copy and paste it, or a combination of both. And now after everyone reads their creative writing, we have to decide as a team whether it was written by human, AI, or both. And then depending on what the team thinks and what the actual answer is by the writer, then we kind of try to find the holes of why we thought it was a certain way. And we try to find the holes in it. And once we have, we can try filling it with different things. So one thing that we found is that, so especially with fiction, it doesn't touch a lot of dark subjects. Like I said, people were asking it how to create bombs and stuff, right? So it made this general space where it won't talk about suicide, it won't talk about murder, it won't talk about a lot of very dark topics. Even if, so a student of mine tried to write a short story about someone who got murdered and it was covered up as a suicide, right? Very Heathers. And it wouldn't do it. It wouldn't help her. It wouldn't give her feedback. As soon as the word suicide entered ChatGPT, it said it will not touch it and it cannot give it any kind of feedback. So being able to like generate these two and pick the holes in there can help you sort of like get around it and figure out its holes, its capabilities, and you can fill in the blanks there in your own way. Okay. It also makes you wonder, like, if it doesn't talk about suicide or any of those dark topics, and you ask it to write a research paper about it, even if it finds facts and statistics, will it purposefully leave it out of a research paper because it doesn't want to talk about those dark subjects? So in these research papers that seemingly sound good, I'm wondering if I maybe think they sound generic and top level, but it's because if they actually took from research that it had available to it, it would be touching prohibited information, right? So comparing the two is really, really important to see what it will touch and what it will not touch. Okay. Cool. All right, now what not to do. There were a lot of different approaches that I have heard. My mother is also a teacher, and so I asked her to pick the brain of some of the English teachers there. And one thing that they're doing in their school is completely banning ChatGPT. It is blocked and firewalled on every single computer, and every single long form piece of writing is written in the classroom. And that terrifies me. And I was looking at other spaces around like I said, I use this every single day, and I am part of a million different newsletters, and I am part of research teams for AI within this company. And where it's going, if you don't know how to use this, I understand the logic, but it's terrifying that these kids are not going to know how to use this, right? So one of the worst things you can do is ban ChatGPT, and then they go and get themselves in trouble, or they are not ready for the field that they try to embark in when they graduate. They try to get into a field, and suddenly there's all this technology that they have never touched before because they were told that it was bad, that it was breaking a rule, or it was against the law. So banning it is probably one of the worst things you could do. Allow use of ChatGPT without your guidance. So now on the converse of that, you shouldn't ban ChatGPT, but you should also make a space where they can use it with your guidance. If they use it unknowingly, they're going to get themselves in trouble again. So this item all goes into teaching them how to use it responsibly so that they are trained to think, all right, this is good. This is a tool. This can help me, but I have to do it this way. If not, it's not helpful, right? So make sure they have your guidance and your step-by-step while they're using this program. Next is avoid using it yourself. Please use this program. The only way that this program can threaten you is if you have absolutely no idea how to use it. If you have no idea how to use it, then it is just going to get smarter and you're going to get left behind. So you need to be using this program yourself. Play with it. Use Claude. Use Bard, ChatGPT. Bard actually created this, it came up with a really cool update a couple of weeks ago where you can generate something, click a little Google button at the bottom of the generation, and it'll actually show you the space where it found that information. So play with it when you're doing research, but use this thing as for everything that you can, even if it's just like finding a restaurant when you're traveling. Say, are there any restaurants around the city, right? See what it can do and play with it. Trust it not to plagiarize just because a paper mimics the student's voice. Please use Grammarly plagiarism checker or some kind of plagiarism checker. I have found a lot of plagiarism in ChatGPT. Granted, I did find it in the earlier days of ChatGPT, but I have found a lot of plagiarism. And so please be using your plagiarism checker. ChatGPT is also really good at not sounding smart if you don't want it to sound smart. So if writers or students try to get sneaky, right? Because we all love sneaky students. If they try to get sneaky and they're just like, write this like a, I don't know, like a 12th grader or like a 10th grader. And it sounds a little bit lesser. So you're gonna be like, oh, there's definitely no way ChatGPT wrote this. Be careful. Put everything through a plagiarism checker and make sure that it is not plagiarized. Like I said, a majority of the lawsuits that have come through is because people on the internet are blaming OpenAI for stealing their published content and training ChatGPT. So you want to avoid that at all costs. Stay away from that whole situation and use a plagiarism checker. The future of AI. I definitely want to talk about this because one of the biggest scare points of AI is like, is it going to take over our jobs, right? AI is only getting smarter. That's just the fact of it, right? AI is getting smarter, so we need to embrace it as a tool and think strategically. And also remember that LLMs are based on patterns. So imagine this as like the next computer to replace pens. Pens didn't go anywhere and pencils are still used, but computers help with efficiency. A calculator to replace longhand problem solving. Sometimes you just need to write on a wall. Actually, at our office, all of our walls are dry erase, and we write all of our brainstorming meetings. We grab a marker and write on the walls. It just helps that way, right? We figure out problems by writing them down. The calculator didn't stop that at any capacity, but it did make things more efficient. People who maybe aren't stronger in math. So when we're thinking about writing, what can possibly make us original as writers? What strategy can put us ahead of the line? When these students are thinking, oh man, I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be an author, I wanted to do this and that, this isn't stopping that. Think about Cormac McCarthy or E.E. Cummings. I have read many a books that give me the same emotional response as The Road. But first time I picked up that book, it felt so different. And I know you guys know what I'm talking about. And E.E. Cummings, it's like a joke now amongst young people who are reading poetry. They're like, oh, E.E. Cummings, he puts like a line, a letter per line, right? But you're never going to forget who he is. You're always going to remember the first time you read one of their things, right? AI is not going to be able, it's going to pick up patterns. And if something has never been created before, it's not going to create it. So we need to be like Cormac McCarthy's. We need to be original. We need to think about what is going to truly put us ahead of the fold. What is going to be our niche? What can we possibly do? Cormac McCarthy broke every grammar rule there possibly ever was, but he's one of the most iconic writers of all time. So what can students do right now to create such an unbreakable force in their writing and in their futures in spite of AI? And that is what we need to figure out. We need to create such a strong personal brand that even if what we write creates an emotional response that somebody else has already experienced, they're never going to forget it. So we got to be like E.E. Cummings. We got to be like Cormac McCarthy. We've got to go beyond what the rules are. Whatever AI is going to pick up, we've got to create our own personal brand to create our own niche. And that is how we're going to survive AI. All right, now we're coming to the end here. AI is a huge world and it's not going anywhere. So I created, these are some of the newsletters that I subscribe to always know what's happening new with OpenAI or Mid-Journey, all of these different generators. The Morning Brew, the Brew actually has a million different newsletters. These are the ones that I love subscribing to. Morning Brew, Tech Brew, and Marketing Brew. They always have great technological insight or just news around the world. Comes to your email every morning. It's actually the first thing I read in the morning as I read about, I don't know, I read about the stock market and AI. So this is a great newsletter. The Neuron Daily also, it's written by developers, so they understand the technical world really well. Alpha Signal, AI Disruptor, Deep Learning Weekly, Data Science Weekly. These are all newsletters that can give you a lot of daily insight into the new headlines of AI and what they're experimenting with and what they're working with. And so please subscribe to some of these. They're really, really great. I know you'll enjoy them. And I know that there's going to be a headline that you're like, oh, look at that. That's interesting. And then finally, I put my email here. Some of you guys reached out to me after the last one too, and I love that. So if you do ever want to run something by me, or you just want some up-to-date stuff, or you're just curious to have a conversation, I'm always here. I would love to help you guys with anything that I can. So now I have talked enough. I've talked for almost an hour. Does anybody have any questions for me? Comments, concerns, roadblocks?
Karina, I have a question. You mentioned about the plagiarism checkers, and I wanted some clarification on that. I think there's the whole issue about AI checkers to see if your students used AI, and then I think what you were saying was if you get content from AI, since AI has scraped the internet and articles and billions literally of data points from publications and so forth, you may be taking something from a publication that you're not giving attribution for. So by running it through a plagiarism checker, not an AI checker, but a plagiarism checker, you're making sure what you're putting into your writing isn't from somebody else's writing. Is that what you were saying?
Yes. Yeah. So the AI checker will tell you if something was written by AI or not.
Right. But
Better try. But the plagiarism checker, the plagiarism checker is sort of like Grammarly plagiarism checker, right? Or any other, there's a million of them, but, or submit to it or whatever that other one's called. But yeah, every piece of writing I've ever gotten from AI has given some percentage of plagiarism. We all know from plagiarism checkers that, up to like 10% isn't that big of a deal. Sometimes it's like 1% from like a bunch of different, sites and stuff. But it always gives some percentage. And there have been papers that I've asked my writers to rewrite because it was a little over the edge. It took like a full sentence from a different website. Actually, OpenAI, ChatGPT, if I remember correctly, it doesn't have 1 billion data points yet. So a lot of its stuff is really old. So a lot of it's really outdated. So sometimes that's also how I've done some of my fact checking. I have found like straight statistics or like straight sentences out of research papers that were written like 10 years ago.
Now ChatGPT-4 is connected to the internet, and Bing AI is connected to ChatGPT-4 for free. So it is becoming, as you mentioned a number of times, how it's getting smarter and smarter, and it's just changing every day. There is a much higher accuracy rate on those. And the thing about Bing AI is it, just like you mentioned with Claude, it actually will give you the references. It shows you exactly where it got that information. So you can go and check and make sure that it's not hallucinating or whatever. So it is remarkable how fast things are changing.
Yeah, so ChatGPT-4, it's connected through plugins. So like the platform itself isn't connected to the internet. Bing does the same thing that Bard does. And if you search for something, then it will see it. It will gain information through searches. But like if you go into chatgpt.com and you go to for, those are, which it still is going to find information on the internet through those plugins. I just don't always trust those plugins 100%, because it was like overnight, suddenly they had hundreds of plugins. And I know people who have submitted plugins to OpenAI, and not to say that those people aren't like extremely smart developers, but they're not from like Fortune 500 companies either. So there's troubleshooting to be done. So Bing AI is a little different. It is a little bit closer to like a Bard system that Google has. But if you go into like ChatGPT itself, it's all through plugins. So you can use it, but I would still be a little careful with it. Yeah.
Some other questions from anyone?
Anything? Okay. Well, if you change your mind, like I said, my email is there. Or you can ask Dr. Roberts and she'll pass them over to me. Or she actually sent me some really great information before this too. So it looks like she's doing a lot of research too. But yeah, if you guys ever need anything, I am here. Oh, looks like there's some things in the chat. Those for me. You mentioned AI trackers that are not valid. Didn't mention one. Oh, okay. So that's it.
While you're reading the chat, I read
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a blog post or what this week, but one academic was, they teach a literature course that's writing intensive, and students always struggle with a Truman Capote work, and I don't remember what the work was, but the first chapter is really difficult for students to get through, and they frequently just don't understand it. And so she had the students feed that information into, or maybe it already had access to it, and they gave them the prompt to rewrite that chapter or that section from the perspective, or on the level of a fifth grader. And then they had it rewrite it on the level of a ninth grader, and then a college freshman. And then the task for the students was to take those three versions of the Capote work and then discuss the differences of it, and how the more elevated version had more nuanced meanings and symbolism and things like that. So they're really getting into the work and still having to write about the work without starting from scratch on an analysis of Truman Capote's work. So I thought that was a fascinating way of using it, and really still getting the students to look at a piece of work critically and write about it critically.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually seems pretty similar to how we use it in-house. Not necessarily like different grade levels, but a lot of times that we do for so everybody who owns a company has a different voice they want to portray. And we will like write something and then have ChatGPT write it in the voice of like Angelina Jolie, or have it rewrite it in the voice of like somebody else, or rewrite it as a professional, rewrite it as a research scientist. One thing I like to do is tell AI, hey, ChatGPT, you are a professional SEO who has been in this industry for 20 plus years. Please solve this problem for me. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it takes on that voice really, really well. It's really cool how it can rewrite that kind of stuff and mold that. That's a really cool idea. I think I'm going to take that.
Yeah. And thank you for recommending those newsletters to follow. I want to remind everyone also that the CTLE on our AI webpage, on our, I think it's on the, now we have an AI webpage and a resources page, but on one of those two pages, we have a list of academic thought leaders to follow on LinkedIn, and some of them you can subscribe to their blogs and so forth. But man, I learn stuff every day from those. And again, all you have to is, it's right on our webpage. All you have to just click on the link and you can subscribe or follow or whatever it is. I think you might find those useful. Well, we've come to the end of the webinar. Corinne, I can't thank you enough for the research that you've done and the work that you're doing, and you're sharing that with us. I want to remind everybody that we have two sort of chat sessions scheduled. One in a week or so, and then one in November. And these are for faculty to just come together and share ideas, and talk about what they're seeing in their classes, and share different things that they're doing with AI. And so these are called practice sharing sessions. And it's just, again, an opportunity for you to just chat. There's no agenda, there's no speaker, it's just us coming together. We'll be meeting both on ground and virtually. We'll be meeting in the Seattle suite, and we'll make some warm cookies and some coffee. If you're coming in via Zoom, I hope you have cookies and coffee in your office or your home. But in any event, I'm sure this is going to be a really enlightening conversation where people are just sharing what they're seeing and what they're trying, and learning from each other. But for today, we want to thank you for your participation in today's webinar. We hope you've learned something today about the challenges, benefits, and practical applications of AI and what that brings to both your classroom as well as the workplace. We would like for you to take a moment to fill out that feedback form. So if you click on that link that's been dropped in the chat, you can fill it out after we finish or do it right now. It won't take but a few minutes, and it really gives us some helpful information as far as how these webinars are working for you, what we could even do better. Lastly, I want you to remind you to, you can always find our videos on our YouTube channel. So just do a search for the CTLE at St. Leo, and you'll find our YouTube channel, and all of our videos are there, as well as they'll be posted on our webinar page of our website when that's up and running again. And we would drop those chats into, those links into the chat, but since the page, the web page or the website is under conversion right now, we'll send you a follow-up email with those links. So you'll have those. And I just want to thank you again for coming. And we hope to see you at the chat session. I believe it's next week, but you'll find that on our events page of our website. And I also just sent you an email. We did send out an email to everybody with that on there. So if you got an email last night about this webinar, it also has those 2 chat sessions on there. So thank you again, and see you the next time.